Good morning. You're listening to Legal Issues of Today. I'm Nathaniel Lee, attorney. With me today, I have my superstar panel, attorney Milton from LA, famously representing Rodney King, which a generational type case that led to videotaping police misconduct. And of course, my research analyst, master's in tax, cybersecurity expert, attorney Vanita with former president of the National Bar. And so we're just happy to have everyone in the house today. Today, the news was dominated by a strange case somewhere in South Carolina involving a wealthy family who pictures ran the courthouse. And it was a strange case. Richard Murdoch was convicted this week by a jury. Looked like in about 45 minutes, although they had 3 hours, Milton. I was looking at one thing, say they made the decisions like right away. And so they announced a verdict for 3 hours, but they made a decision immediately. But before I get started, let me give you a quick timeline on this case. Over 3 generations, a member of the Murdoch family served as the 14th Circuit solicitor, and they led in prosecution in multiple counties: Allen, Beaufort, Colleton, Hampton, and Jasper County in the southern part of South Carolina. Randolph Murdoch Sr. was elected the 14th Circuit solicitor in 1920, and he served in that position until 1940. His son, Randolph, took over until his retirement in 1986. His son, Randolph Murdoch III, took over in 1987 and served through 2005. In 2006, then the Democrat governor, Mark Sanford, appointed Duffy Stone to serve as the 14th Circuit. So the Murdoch family controlled prosecution of individuals and even sending people to the death penalty for crimes during their tenure. And so on June the 7th, 2021, Alex Murdoch made a call to 911 and said he found his wife, Margaret, who was 52, and his son, Paul, 22, shot dead outside of their home in Isoton, a small community about an hour north of Hilton Head Island. And that's where this mystery began. So we have the wife and the son killed. But the famous attorney, now infamous attorney, claimed that he was nowhere near the shooting. He had an alibi. They had a hearing in court on the alibi issue. But the thing I want to start with today, what I was perplexed by watching this trial, the thing that drove me nutty is that you had a guy who had a minimum of about 50 financial crimes, about 50. He robbed everybody, stole from everybody. And obviously, each of those crimes would have put him in prison for the rest of his life. I don't understand why a guy who have to go on the stand and say, I'm a chronic liar, I've lied about everything for the last decade. How do you put a guy like that on the stand? I start with Attorney Grant. Maybe he can explain this fiasco.
It's called gambling, Nathaniel Lee. Gambling. He's a man. He's an attorney. He's probably somewhat arrogant, somewhat conceited. He's used to convincing people of his ways and his opinion and his position, just like Maddox, who went decades with the Ponzi scheme, even though there was an investigator who went to the SEC and pleaded with them to look at the facts. And the facts were, this was a scam. He was talking about doing business with banks that had never heard of him before. This investigator went to the banks. They said, no, if he does these kind of investments, he has to come through one of 4 banks. He hadn't been through it. So there's a book written by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers, I recently read, and it's about our desire to want to believe people. So we give you the benefit of the doubt normally when we listen to you, especially if we don't have any suspicion outright to not believe you. So Mr. Murdoch is used to his statue presenting him in a way that people don't question him. People just believe anything he says. And so he has that confidence and that belief in himself when he went into this trial that the 60-some crimes you're talking about, financial crimes, does not put him in front of or being involved in killing his son and his wife, which takes another mental state, I believe, to do. So that's how he probably looked at it. And I'm just speculating, but it's a fascinating read in Malcolm Gladwell's book about our ability or our instinct to want, or we want to trust and we want to believe people. And he talks about how spies get away with lying for years. One of the famous spies was a female spy from Cuba. And she just lied for 20-some years. And every time she get close during a review to getting caught, she would cross her legs another way. And the interviewer, normally a male, would be distracted with the crossing of that leg, them legs, one way or the other. And that she got away with that little trick for years. But, Murdoch was a, psychopathic liar. And he
Attorney
believed he
Banks?
could get away with it.
Attorney Banks, what do you think about that decision?
Alex Madoff was a pathological liar. He had perfected defrauding his clients, friends, and family for years and years and years and years. As you stated, his family has a lineage that goes back to the Confederacy, Robert E. Lee. And he's been very successful in lying, all of his life. He was a trial lawyer. He successfully argued cases in that court and won. And I guess he just figured that he could take the stand and make a distinction between lying and all of those financial situations, but he wasn't lying with respect to killing his wife and son.
Yeah, lying is not new, Nathaniel. I mean, it's many people in the South, when Ms. Banks said Robert E. Lee, they still believe the narrative that was perpetrated after the Civil War, that the Confederacy won the war. There's a lot of people that still believe that.
Well, here's my concern. Say he's facing 50 years or so for all the financial crimes. Why would you put him on the stand? He doesn't walk out of court a free man once he takes the stands, because he has then confessed to all these other crimes. I've never seen that done before. You put your client on the stand who then have to confess that I did all these other crimes. Now, not only does he have to confess to the crime, now he's got financial consideration, would mean that he'll never have a penny the rest of his life. Now, his whole idea, he had this other crazy idea, was to have a guy shoot him in the head to collect on his $10,000 life insurance policy.
I don't know the statute of limitation on this white collar crimes or the paper crimes you're talking about. And I don't know what the balance was as far as how soon he could have gotten out of prison and how well they could have proved those things he said he did on the stand. I don't know if that would have been enough to prosecute and convict him of some of those or all of those crimes, but maybe in balance, the being found guilty or of murdering your wife and your son is a hell of a blow. So in balance, he just didn't want to be convicted of that. And maybe that's why he took that risk.
Well, I guess I didn't see whether or not he had life insurance on his wife's life and his son's life like it did on, I don't know. I didn't check that out. I was just so stunned that I watched part of his criminal testimony and I just couldn't stand to watch more than 5 minutes.
Why?
Well, because the prosecutor would ask a question that required a yes or no answer, and he would give a full-page answer.
The prosecutor.
I understand that. And so, see, he had 99, I just looked at the update, he had 99 other state counts pending against him for financial crime, 99. Mistakes, it says 60, but it's 99. I look at the article, 99. So he would never have gotten out of prison on the financial crimes by taking a stand. And that's why I'm perplexed as to, even you have a con man, I don't think even a con man be able to convince an ordinary citizen of his innocence if you confess to 99 crimes. You know, I mean, I don't get that. I just thought that when I saw him on the stand, I'm saying that's got to be a dumb decision. Even if they had evidence of probative value, with expert witness, you could generally get some conflict in evidence. I don't know.
Well, it just seems to me that, you know, the motive in this case, and argued by the prosecution, was that he killed his wife and son in order to distract from his opioid addiction and drug dealing, and to cover up these financial crimes, which had already been exposed, you know. And so the son was being charged in another case involving the death of one of his friends in a boating accident. And what's so interesting about this case is that the great-grandfather was killed back in or died back in the 1940s as a result of his vehicle wound up on a train track. And so he was killed as a result of being hit by a train. And guess what? The grandson got the insurance proceeds. So I'm wondering, I mean, there's death following this family over the years. As you know, the maid fell down the stairs, and they're planning to exhume her body at this point. Years ago, another friend of his other son, you know, was found, you know, in the middle of the highway, and there were suspicious circumstances. So suspicious deaths have followed this family over the decades.
Well, on our Zoom chat, Renee, as a potential audience juror, quote, he was going to be convicted whether he testified or not because he lied about being at the scene of the crime. And I don't know, she may be right. I didn't watch the trial well enough to make that determination, but I did see one of the pundits say that was critical evidence. But usually you can oftentimes explain timelines when you're doing jury trials and come up with conflicting timelines. You know, some things are readily ascertainable and sometimes you can't. And she felt that a privileged person met justice. It's about time. It's a rare conviction in American history. The local district attorney recused himself from the case, and that's why we had the state attorney general prosecuting the case. And so I thought that was fascinating when I kept seeing the attorney general office. And what was weird, and maybe Milton, maybe that's not a big deal, but I counted like over 20 people on the stage. None were minorities in terms of prosecution, which I don't know. I just thought with state as much diversity, I was thinking to myself, they have no diversity in their AG's office there in South Carolina?
Well, I think there's a shortage of diversity in a lot of America still to this day. We're doing a seminar in July in Louisiana on implicit bias to some trial lawyers, about 50 of them from around the country. And in getting prepared for this seminar, I discovered that still to this day, there are signs posted in parts of Louisiana, blacks out of the county by sundown. There are sundown signs warning blacks to not be in this county. I tried a case in Jefferson Parish some years ago, and the rule was you can't talk to the jury about the race of your client. And the rule in that court was, and we had to fight about getting that set aside during my trial, because I was representing an African American, and it was an all-white jury pool. So Nate, there's some old rules and practices still happening around this country, man, in our justice system.
Well, next we turn to the election capital of the country in Chicago. We had a dramatic result to their primary election there in Chicago. The city mayor, Laura Lightfoot, lost her bid for a second term. It was an epic loss, they described it. She made history 4 years ago as the first Black woman and openly gay person to be elected mayor of the nation's third largest city. And maybe Attorney Banks, who's our expert in that area, can explain this loss, at least quantify is like, what's the situation?
Absolutely.
Why did she get such a small percentage of the vote?
Absolutely, Attorney Lee. It was a stunning loss this past Tuesday. But I wanted to go back just briefly to this Murdaugh trial. And yes, the jury returned a very swift verdict, as you stated, in 3 hours. But from what I understand from interviews of the jury following their decision, that they made the decision in about 45 minutes, and that the initial vote was 2 not guilty, 1 not sure, and 9 initially voted guilty. Colleagues, had you heard that initial vote prior to now?
On the Murdaugh trial?
On the Murdaugh trial, that was the initial vote. But once they began, looking at the evidence, they came to the conclusion, of course, the most damning evidence was the cell phone video that placed him at the scene of the crime. Mm. And then, of course, his constant lying. But yeah, go ahead, Attorney Lee.
If he denied being at the scene and the video showed accurately in time that he was there at the time of the crime, not necessarily the place of the crime, then he took a chance where he would be able to fool the jury that your eyes are lying to you, I guess, and he lost that bet.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's, some cops do that a lot. I mean, cops do that all the time. Your eyes are lying to you. And some jurors, one, will agree. I can't believe that what I see.
Yeah, Renee said that she'd have found him guilty. She'd had some doubt if he had not taken the stand, apparently. And that was my concern. I say, once he took the stand and had to admit to all these financial crimes, and, I think he'd have been better off just keeping his mouth shut, but that was not in his DNA. And the guy had this diabolical plan to kill himself to get $10 million insurance for his remaining son. I mean, that's a person that should have been convicted, because it's not a representation, certainly, of the legal community, but more importantly, as a father who killed their own freaking son and their wife. I mean, I don't think of a crime that could be worse than that. But
with respect to our comments regarding diversity, of course, you notice that the judge presiding over the case is African-American, Judge Clifton Newman. And he was appointed by the Chief Justice to preside over this case.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Well, yes. Back.
yeah,
Did you have further thoughts, Attorney Lee?
yeah, I looked him up. Let's see. He was a great judge. I thought that he did a phenomenal job. You know, I'm not sure in terms of, I mean, I noticed that he had a very personal note because he knew the lawyer very well that appeared in his court, and he gave a historical overview of the sentencing. I thought that was kind of interesting. You know, I don't know, he was a fascinating judge, and he had a really good demeanor. And I like the fact that that's the way judges should act during a trial, with a very calm demeanor, but he controlled the course of the litigation with a very strong hand. But I mean, I thought it was a pretty well-controlled trial. I thought he did a great job. And but he has a lot of experience. You know, he is over he's 73 now. I mean, 71.
71.
Yeah, so, but he has extensive experience as a judge. And it was weird. He was elected initially by the State General Assembly in 2000. So I'm not, and he was reelected to his fourth term, and he's a circuit court judge. But he had presided over several high-profile cases, I noticed when I looked him up. And so he was a phenomenal judge. And I think that that rendition of the facts he gave at the sentence hearing was pretty epic, in the sense that talked about he knew his lawyer, how they controlled the prosecution. They had also sent people to death. And but at the end, he gave him 2 life sentences to run consecutively, which means that effectively he gave him the death penalty.
So he was sentenced yesterday?
Yes, he gave him the death penalty in prison because he gave him 1 life sentence and a second life sentence. So he got to die twice, I guess. But so
maybe he can live twice. But so they sent no time for motion for new trial or an appeal to find out if there's jury misconduct or anything. I mean, shucks. He sentenced him right away. They waived the time for that sentence.
I don't know how they do it in South Carolina, but they filed post-trial motion for judgment notwithstanding verdict orally, which was denied. And then, but the judge pointed out something that was really interesting, Milton, and they filed a notice of alibi saying that he was not at the crime scene.
Yeah.
Then he gets on the stand and says that he was. I mean,
I've seen people do that before. They call that ignorance. But
okay.
You see, it seems to me that there's a rush there. I don't know. You got to have a gap in time. I mean, I may walk into a juror in a coffee shop or something, and I'm sorry about, I couldn't prove this man innocent, and I wasn't a good lawyer. And they go, oh no, it wasn't your fault, because Mary Lou came and said she talked to Susie Sue, and they know this about this man, know this. So you find out that there was some extraneous conversations and evidence presented to some of the jurors that would give you food for a motion for new trial. And I've gotten a new trial in a death penalty case where the jury found the person guilty, sane, and gave him death. And with a phone call that I was able to get a phone number from one of the jurors and interview, and after the verdict, I called that juror at my office about 5 o'clock that evening and told I was incompetent and I don't know how I fell. And she said, oh no, Mr. Grimes, it wasn't you, wasn't that. We knew who you were. We knew you were the baby blues lawyer. Now how that came out, because it sure didn't come out in trial. So we developed that fact and found out all the jurors at some point or another had discussed me being the baby blues lawyer, where I represented a woman who had postpartum psychosis, and we prevailed in our case. And so we got a new trial from the trial judge when we presented those jurors and questioned them about, when did you hear about he was the baby blues lawyer? Well, it was in the cafeteria, and Susie Sue came with a newspaper article and showed us this picture of Mr. Grimes in the paper, handsome man, blah, 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 blah. And we talked about it. I'm serious.
So you got
I
You got
know
a
you
new
are.
trial.
Huh?
You got a new trial based on the fact the jury had personal knowledge of you getting someone
Because
else
they,
acquitted.
yes, because they discussed me and it was never discussed in the voir dire. You follow me? And oh, I heard about this. We were standing outside waiting to come in one morning, and someone said something about, is Mr. Grimes here, the baby blues lawyer? I had gotten a tag called the baby blues lawyer by them. You follow me? And we found that out because one juror said to me, it wasn't your fault, Mr. Grimes. We knew who you were. You did a well job, you know, this and that and that. And I'm oh, that's right. We do a motion for a new trial. Found out they all had at one point or another mentioned my handling a very high profile case some years earlier about the woman killing the baby.
But here's the problem. If you
You
get a new
follow me?
trial in this case, because former testimony is generally admissible, so you get to play his prior testimony that's televised. So how does that help you?
Because the rules are that jurors are limited to all the evidence that come in and nothing else and this and that, and you can't look at TV and you can't do that. And when you have an opportunity, either by accident or investigation, to find out what happened to this entity, to this body of people who are supposed to be protected from the out, they're supposed to be in a bubble that they're never in. I had a juror tell me, Mr. Grimes, I went home and told my husband after y'all did them open statement, that boy didn't murder that officer. He was fighting for his life. I said, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. They talk, they do things, they research. And it seemed as though when you sentence a man in the same day that the verdict come back, you got an appeal then, but you don't have that other motion for due trial. A judge may have given a bad instruction that he realizes after the fact. I've had that to happen. You follow me? So I just don't understand the procedure that you're telling me that happened here.
I was shocked as well that the verdict was one day and the sentencing was the next day.
Thank
Or
you.
the day after the next day. Because remember, one of the jurors right at the end of the case was dismissed for the same reasons that Milton is talking about, discussing the case. And so once you pull that onion, back, who knows what might be uncovered. And to your point, Nathaniel, about the evidence that he's already admitted to just being played back in a new trial, from my perspective, it's not over until it's over, right? And so if a judge grants a new trial, if a new trial is granted, then you start all over again.
Wow.
And that's consistent with the person, would be consistent with the personality of, Alex Murdaugh. You extend it out as far as you can. That's my thinking. But I thought it was stunning that one of the jurors was dismissed right before they went into deliberations. What do you think, Attorney Lee, about that fact?
I think that's important, but here's the situation. Because he was accused of a double murder, he was not eligible for pretrial release. So he's in no worse situation now because they could also file these post-trial motions. He's still going to not be a free man. So even if they had sentenced him 3 weeks later, Milton, to your point, it wouldn't have mattered. He'd have still been in jail. But the second part about this is what's unusual about this case. What's unusual about this case, any case I've watched, is that he admitted to all these financial crimes, which would have kept him in prison the rest of his life anyway. So he could have given him a separate life sentence for the financial crime he's admitted on the stand. And that's what I thought was baffling to me.
I wouldn't be doing a prison sentence for murder. That's all, Nate. I wouldn't be doing a prison sentence for murder. I don't know what would have happened to those financial crimes that weren't charged or weren't prosecuted before this murder case came about. But I wouldn't be doing a conviction for something that I hadn't been found guilty of, which is murder. And that's all.
Now, one final comment, Pierre Pullins, he made a comment. He thought that he was stealing all that money in settlement, lacks oversight of lawyer. That's actually false. The truth of the matter is that the legal industry is the most regulated of all industry. In our state, the lawyer's account that they deposit settlement in, it's called an IOTA account that monitors for the Supreme Court. So now the way he got away with this, because they're a prominent firm that were prosecutors that controlled that part of the state, apparently. And so I'm beginning to see a pattern here. I saw in California, Milton, you had Michael Vanita, who was a prominent lawyer, and you had that other guy that stole millions of dollars up in Northern California, do the same thing. How did they get away with that?
No, the guy here in LA, it wasn't Northern California, I don't believe. I think you're talking about, I'm sorry. What's his name, Vanita? The guy in LA here.
Wait a second.
You can't remember his name.
Talking about the housewife's husband, the lawyer that now has dementia.
Yeah, and I got
last name starts with a G.
Girardi. Thank you.
Yeah, Girardi. Thank you.
We all got some level of brain deficiency here, but anyway, Girardi, he just didn't give from little children to old people in that have been crippled by accidents in wheelchairs. He thought that his wife needed a $750,000 ring or bracelet or something, diamond bracelet he bought with some of the trust fund money. He just lived off of the trust fund money, Nathaniel, and kept lying to clients about the settlement is being held up or the award is being held up for one reason or another. He followed Don King's pattern. When the guys would ask for money, Don would write them a check for $500,000. Oh, go ahead. You need some money? He just write them a check. But he owed them millions and millions, but he kept them at bay by giving them increments of the money that they were owed. So Girardi, and plus he took people of the bar, administrators and officials, to Vegas on weekend party trips, and he hired members of the bar, children and family members in his office. So they covered for him.
Okay. Now we'll go to Pierre now to talk about the Chicago election. Only Pierre. You had some interesting comments about the Chicago election. What's your thoughts? Pierre?
I can't even believe Vanita Banks let that happen in Chicago like that. But she's supposed to be policing the polls. So.
Yeah, we lost Pierre, so we go
Mayor
to
Lightfoot really had, a formidable challenge. She sailed into office in 2019 as a corruption busting outsider. She carried all 50 Chicago wards at that time. She came in immediately. What are you doing, buddy? Let me just finish this. She came in immediately challenging the teachers union. In fact, they held a strike for several days before the teachers union contract.
Keep it down, Mommy's trying to rest. What are you doing?
Negotiated. And then, she led the city through the height, of COVID-19. And she had to shut the whole city down. And so she also had tension with the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police as well, when she mandated that all police officers be vaccinated. And then you also had the teachers union, who were, during the pandemic, they were very, very concerned about their safety, at the height of the pandemic. And then Chicago saw increase in crime. The economy worsened as, skyscrapers in the Loop, the Chicago Loop, remained unoccupied, for a significant period of time. Now the economy has now, come back, but Mayor Lightfoot had some significant challenges. And at the end of the day, she lost the support of, the police union and the teachers unions, and they're both very, very powerful organizations in Chicago. Also, there were 9 candidates. There was only one white candidate in this race. Several African American, and so the African American vote, which is also very, very important, was split. And so ultimately, she lost some powerful, allies. And as a result, she came in 3rd place last Tuesday, not making the runoff. Paul Vallis, who's a former school superintendent who had the support, was endorsed by, interestingly, the police union. He won by 34% of the vote. Brandon Johnson, who's a Cook County commissioner, he obtained the endorsement of the Chicago's teachers union. He came in 2nd with 20% of the vote, and Lori Lightfoot came in 3rd with 17% of the vote. And the African American vote was split among several African American candidates.
Too many in the field, the 2 special interest groups with a lot of money. I don't know how you control that, Nathaniel. You're supposed to be an election expert. How do you let special interest groups determine who the people have as an official representing them? The special interest group seems to influence who we have as an official because they have the money to do so. I don't know, I guess that's democracy, but police unions and teachers unions, police unions especially concern me because I saw how much money they gave to the former district attorney here in LA. The unions as far south as San Diego, unions as far north as Sacramento donated to the DA in LA campaign. And they gave her millions of dollars apiece. Millions, $1.5 million, $1.7 million given by the union. They give a lot of money to these elections, y'all. A lot of money, a lot of influence.
Well, see, here's the situation. Here in our town, the police union in Indianapolis endorsed a candidate for prosecutor in last year's election. Now, Milton, Vanita, the prosecutor they endorsed and never had a public record show that she ever appeared in any criminal court. She had a grand jury case. She had 2 administrative cases. So we have a lawyer that had 3 reported cases. In Indiana, we have a court service that lists every case that you've done. I got thousands of them. She had 3. I looked up 3 cases. I didn't see where she had won any case.
Hadn't tried a traffic ticket.
Yeah, and they endorsed a candidate who wouldn't have a clue how to do a criminal trial. Now, a prosecutor's office is a trial court. They are trial attorneys. And the police union endorsed a candidate who had no criminal trial experience. It was shocking. Now, the reason they did that is unforgivable because the current prosecutor has prosecuted more cops than anybody in the history of the city. So the cops are now being held accountable, like Richard Murdoch, for misconduct. Right. And they resent that. Right. And so I think it's a sad day when these special interest group, but it didn't work in our city because I don't think they got, she's got 39% of votes, so it didn't matter.
She got a lot of votes though, Nate, but go ahead. 39% is a significant number of votes.
Yeah, but she needed 51%.
I got you.
And so she, the point is that they would endorse somebody who's highly unfit. And so we talk about special interest group. Now, but what alarmed me, Vanita, is this. Yeah, there was a lot of candidates, but she came in 3rd. So all you had to do is be in the top 2. So how can a sitting mayor with all those contacts and all those positions? So the mayor of Chicago has a lot of appointed positions. Chief of police, chief of fire, all these appointed positions, You have a political machine already in place. So how do you get third place?
Seemed
Well,
like
again,
Vanita
she
should have had
clashed with the police and the teachers union. She lost support of, the city alderman, and she also clashed with Governor Pritzker. So ultimately, she had few, allies. And the biggest issue that people had was over crime increasing in the city of Chicago. Although homicides had decreased and shootings in 2022, since before the peak of the pandemic, robberies, thefts, and burglaries, had increased. And so she had a lot of formidable challenges. And, she's also, as you know, the first African-American openly gay woman to serve as mayor as well.
Do you think that race played a part in her mayor election? Her wife or spouse is Caucasian. Did that play a factor in the Black community there? Or because she got elected the first time based on the same marital or family relationship, so why did it matter the second time if it did?
Maybe it didn't. But do you believe, Vanita, that a thinning of the crowd there would have helped her win? In other words, 5 or 6 of those people be convinced not to run?
I think it would have helped a lot.
Okay.
I think it would have helped a lot because the African-American community is a really strong voting bloc. And the fact that that vote was dispersed over, that number of candidates. I think she received 1 in, 6 votes. And just the predominating concern was, public safety.
Okay, let's take one of our callers. Okay, Pierre Pullen, you got a question about the Chicago mayor or comment?
Yes, Nate, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna ask you if I can mix that in with the Jodissa Cooper case here in Indianapolis. Just want to get your permission. It's called the case about Jodissa Cooper. And Milton, I'm glad you're here today because this is a case down here that would have George Gascon scratching his head. And Vanita, I'm glad you're on because I'm really disappointed with the Black professional women, elected women in the city. Real quickly, we had a woman, grandmother, mother, who was killed about 2 months ago. She was in a car fighting with her boyfriend. The long story, the facts that aren't in dispute was that the gun went off, and I know the family, the Cooper family. My friend was killed. The boyfriend left her there in the car, and he got lost for a month. And recently, the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, they caught him, and he was in jail, our jails, for 5 days. And that prosecutor that Nate touts that he spent a lot of money on getting elected, Ryan Mears, and he's a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat, but I don't care for him much. They're not going to pursue any charges against that man. Here's the point. The point is Lori Lightfoot just lost an election up there because of crime. We have a mayor's election coming up here in Indianapolis, and we have an extremely wealthy candidate on the Republican side. If he wins, our mayor's going to have some problems. And if that case goes viral, the Democrats are going to have problems. I can't, we're scratching our head as to how there's no charges in that case. We're just scratching our heads. And I just wanted to bring that up and put that in your knowledge base because no women politicians down here, are outraged. It doesn't seem like, and I'll just get off the air and let you guys.
Wait a second,
take
Pierre,
it.
before you get off the air,
Okay.
I looked the case up on the court system, and a person named Ross was charged with reckless homicide. They say that he and her fought in the car over his handgun during the struggle.
Over his handgun.
Went out and killed her. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure of. I wasn't there. I'm not sure of how they determine the charges, but the advantage they got is that they interview witnesses. They look at physical evidence. There's biomechanics. You do an autopsy, and you look at siblings, and you can determine how close they are when a gun is fired. And so there's scientific evidence that aids in the decision process, and I don't have access to that, so I can't make an assessment of whether or not the charges were warranted or unwarranted. I don't know, but so I make no comment about that because I can't. And so when people make assumption a lot of time, you have to look at the actual scientific evidence, and that I'm not sure about.
Can you hear me? One last point. He left her there in the car, and he was gone for a month. I mean, help me understand that.
Well, flight may be an indicia of guilt, but it's not an absolute proof of guilt, Pierre, and it may be a reasonable explanation for that flight. I can't say what his defense is, but we don't know all the facts. We don't know what they learned, whether she was dead when he left or why he left, or other than he was afraid. And so I don't know if you have all the information yet, Pierre, to judge him. I'm sure that you don't have all the information, but
well,
there it is.
The news media hit kind of hard here, but I guess we won't get any information out of this local prosecutor. But people just see that as another soft on crime move measure from a Democratic prosecutor. And I'm just, that has to be said, and it has to be addressed. But thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the guy's name is David Ross, and he actually was charged with reckless homicide.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that we don't give out misinformation. He's charged with felony for causing her death, but not for murder. And I'm not sure of what the reason that. I mean, there's different type of offenses. Murder requires specific intent. I mean, I know Milton, the expert on this stuff, but I'm not sure what the elements were met or not when they made a charge decision. So a lot of times when people make assumptions, I know it's particularly about cases they see in the news. The news footage of most events I discovered in my own practice, Milton, Vanita, it's just not accurate most of the time.
Right.
Police report that are released to the public, in my experience, are probably about 80% of the time are not accurate. When I do deposition stuff, I get these police rendition of facts, and they end up being wrong about 80% of the time. So I don't know. I don't make assessment about crimes and stuff like that unless I look at the actual physical evidence. And so when people make these assumptions, I don't know whether or not that was a case where a prosecutor has been lenient. I doubt it. The prosecutors are pretty aggressive, but they rely on scientific evidence just like we do as lawyers. So I'm not sure.
All right.
I think Pierre is correct about the point with respect to Democrats and whether or not Lori Lightfoot's loss should be something that mayors in other big cities should be paying attention to, and whether this will become a test of Democrat attitudes regarding crime and policing.
Here's what's interesting. One final comment on this issue. I don't know, conservatively speaking, there's probably 100,000 cases that go before the prosecutor's office in Marion County. That includes traffic tickets, of course, which is the biggest number one thing that go through our court system. Traffic ticket is the biggest thing, but they take time. So when a person look at one case and says that the prosecutor is too lax, that's usually not the way things are. In other words, you can't take one case. Now, in our city, the chief of police who does the arrest is African American. Our deputy chief is African American. So, we have people from our community that are making decisions based upon evidence that they review. Their advantage is that they actually look at the physical evidence. And I'm not sure I think it's terrible when a person kills somebody. Particularly, I think it's bad when they disappear for a month, but I don't know the circumstances. I don't know anything about the case. But in any event, we're running out of time. One final comment from my audience, and I'm sorry I didn't get to all the calls today, but one closing comment from Attorney Banks. Any further comment about that Chicago mayor or anything like that? Your mayor coming third place?
The runoff election will take place on April 4th. The two candidates, Paul Vallis, he's the most conservative candidate. His focus is on hiring more police officers, so we'll see how that works. And Brandon Johnson is more progressive, and he promises to focus on addressing the root causes of, crime in our city. And he's even spoken of defunding the police. And those comments he's walked back in recent weeks. So it'll be very interesting, this showdown between these two candidates for mayor of the city of Chicago.
Milton?
I would just say we have to be very careful in rushing to judgment on these high-profile cases and try to gather as much or as many of the facts as we humanly can before we start espousing opinions that are not supported by all of the evidence. That's all.
In conclusion, I do these cases on a regular basis, and I have one case myself where I believe that a police officer intentionally here in the city covered up evidence of misconduct, and I see it all the time. But that doesn't mean that the whole system is bad, but you do have misconduct occurring all the time. So I'm not naive about that. So I'd like to thank our callers for calling in today, and I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody today. We'll be talking to you again next week as we talk to Legal Issue of the Day. Thank you, and God bless you all, and have a great weekend.
Wow.
Thank you so much.